Hello everyone, and welcome to the This Is Not Therapy Hour. I am Brandon Tessers. I'm a licensed therapist, but this is not therapy for many reasons. I mean, pretty obviously, it's a stream. But it is an opportunity for us to talk and to ask questions and answer questions, sometimes me asking questions of you guys. It's just an opportunity for us to have a conversation. So for those of you who are here, thank you for being here. And for those of you who are in chat, thank you for being in the chat. It's a lot more fun and engaging and helpful for me to have people who are making comments, asking questions. You know, as I always say, we're shaped by the context. We're shaped by the people around us. The more that you say to me, the more it shapes what I do. So we always pick a topic to start with, and we've picked one today. But that doesn't mean that our conversation has to stay within the scope of that topic. That's just to make it easier for us to get started on something. So if you want to join in that conversation, great. If you want to take us in a different direction, great. And we'll figure it out as we go along, like everything. I run a therapy and coaching practice called Effective Artistry. That's that fun logo up there in the corner. We specialize in working with neurodiversity and executive functioning. And particularly with creativity and artists, which creativity and artistry are different things. But, you know, I feel like I got to do better about putting all this stuff out there every time. I think I said everything that needed to be said. If you are in the chat from YouTube, it'll be under your Google account. If you're in it from Twitch, it'll be under your Twitch account. Just be aware of that when you're typing things. I try not to call people's names out because it is a public stream. But if anything like that is a concern for you, then you can always create a different, anonymous account or whatever to be able to talk in the chat without having to worry about it being connected to your real Google account or anything. I think I said everything now. If I haven't, I apologize. Feel free to ask questions if I didn't clarify something. So today, I'm going to switch what thing I'm fidgeting with because that clicky is annoying. Today, the topic was proposed of waking up in the morning, which I think is a good one, but we're probably going to expand that out into sleep generally, but specifically waking up in the morning. Yeah. There's a reason that is coming up for a lot of people right now. If it's coming up for you, you're not alone. Heck, it came up for me this morning, which I honestly I thought a lot about, but not in connection with this and talking about this topic until literally just now. For the first time in, I don't know how many months, I fell back asleep after waking up with my kids at 6 a.m. Well, 5:50. This whole thing is impacted by context so much, but we generally, I won't get into all that. We'll just start by talking about sleep and waking up. Typically, when people are talking about sleep issues, there's more of a focus on sleep onset or sleep duration. Sleep onset being, from the moment that you start trying to go to sleep until you actually do fall asleep. That period is called sleep onset. And then a sleep duration, of course, is how much sleep, the quantity of sleep you're getting, both of which are important. And waking up is also important. And the thing that's funny to me about sleep just generally, I don't know if funny is the right word, but it is an incredibly complicated process, both falling asleep and waking up. And I will try to stay out. My one true weakness is a weakness for a lot of us, waking up early or just sleep in general. Totally lost track of what I was saying there. Oh, yeah, the sleep is weird. It's very unusual, right? Like we just stop being conscious for a while, but we dream, and sometimes we kind of remember those dreams a little bit, or sometimes we don't, or sometimes we don't dream, or it is strange. And it doesn't come across that way all the time because it's something that we all do naturally from the moment we're born, right? We have no choice but to engage in this process. But it is a very complicated process. And I'm talking about like neurologically speaking, which is not my area of expertise, but I've talked with plenty of neurological, neuroscientists and researchers and those kinds of things. Effectively, the process of falling asleep and the process of waking up is several different processes, several different systems shutting down or switching modes, or however you want to describe it, in concert with each other, not simultaneously, because the things need to happen in the right order, and then in reverse to wake up. And it's all fascinating. Maybe we won't talk about today, but I love talking about the state of being not quite fully awake, but not quite fully asleep, which we have different fun words for, whether it's going from wakefulness to sleep and vice versa. And I'm blanking. Hypnopomp is going from sleep to wakefulness. Hypnagogy, I don't know, it's going from wakefulness to sleep. One of my friends recently told me that her thesis advisor wrote a book on the history of sleep, and particularly about the idea of second sleep, which blew my mind. I am not familiar with that phrase, second sleep. If you want to share that in there, I would be very curious to know. And with everything, like biological, organic, whatever, experiential that we as humans experience, the experience of it is separate from the complexity behind the scenes, right? Like what we observe is only a portion of it, and it ends up feeling simple. And one practical, particular way this manifests is I'll ask people, for example, how's your sleep? Do you struggle with sleep at all? And they'll say, no, I fall asleep great. And then later they'll say, I'm always tired and I have a hard time waking up, or I never get enough sleep. And it's a broad question, which it is a very broad question, to say, do you struggle with sleep, gets interpreted in a very narrow framework of, do I get enough sleep, or do I fall asleep quickly? Wakefulness doesn't exist because it sounds too much like feeling awake, and I'm pretty sure that's a myth. Okay. Heat regulation. Cringy, I know, but sleeping nude allows for body heat regulation and allows for faster sleep and maintaining sleep. That is a great practical suggestion, although not everybody necessarily would be comfortable with the sleeping nude part. But yeah, monitoring temperature, and we'll get to, well, maybe we just go to that right now. One really important aspect of sleep is sleep quality, not how quickly you fall asleep or how long you are asleep for. Those are also important, but this is a separate thing. How is your sleep quality? And we actually have a lot of great tools at this point. They're not perfect by any means, but between smartwatches and cell phones and different apps and things, we have some better tools than we've ever had for people to be able to monitor their own sleep quality. So just as a very off the top, quick, across the board suggestion, if you are struggling with energy levels in any way at all, it's worth looking. There are free apps that you can get on your phone without any extra devices, watches or anything like that. And you can just set the phone on the bed and it'll monitor how much you move and the noises. Start studying it. Take a look at what might be happening. Second sleep is when you fall asleep, wake up in the middle of the night, do a bunch of stuff, then go back to sleep. According to the advisor, this used to be a regular thing. That is really interesting to me. I would love to know more about that. If you have any resources, link them for me, but I'm going to make a note for myself. One of the statistics that I have learned, I don't know, over the past few years as I've gotten further and further into all this, that's kind of blown my mind more than anything else, is that people who have an ADHD diagnosis are 7 times more likely than average to also have a sleep apnea diagnosis. So there's obviously some correlations here, and I don't think it's as simple as saying, well, you're not sleeping well and that's why you're scattered and have a hard time tracking things. But I'm also not going to say that doesn't impact it, because it definitely does. Whether you have ADHD or not, when you're more tired, it's hard to track things, to be whatever you want to call it, driven or motivated, just to get things done and to make sure that you're not losing things. And we all know this. The sleepier, the more tired you get, it kind of becomes more difficult to track things. I'm just going to keep using that same phrase. Indica is great, but difficult to adjust according to personal biochemistry. That's a comment from the chat. And yeah, chemicals is whatever type of chemical that you're talking about, whether it's indica, which is a type of marijuana. I'm not exactly sure what the distinction is between indica versus other types, or sleeping pills, or nighttime teas, or all kinds of different things. Pretty much the only reason I have a Fitbit is to monitor sleep. I did a ton of research on what activity monitors had the best scientific backing for sleep specifically first. Cool. Yeah. So I've looked into this some, but not a ton, and it's in terms of like what apps or what equipment is going to be the best. So Fitbit is a good one, it sounds like. Indica has helped me achieve 8 hours of sleep, yet napping still seems to be needed. Yeah, well, that can definitely be the case. And I'm grateful that people are active in the chat. So help guide me, as opposed to me kind of talking about whatever thing and then coming across to your comments. Are there specific things that you guys in the chat are wanting to talk about, know about, struggling with, or like you've been doing, things that you want to share that might be helpful for other people? I think that's great. I appreciate it all. But yeah, monitoring sleep quality, like everything we do when we're talking about executive functioning and perception, all this stuff, the more data you get, the more you observe, the more data you have to be able to play around with. It doesn't necessarily mean that if your sleep quality looks like X, Y, and Z, you must do 1, 2, 3. It doesn't necessarily go across, like an equation like that. It's not always so simple. But we talk all the time here about all of these things are about iteration, experimentation. You look at the sleep quality, you look at the sleep duration, sleep onset, all these different things, your feeling of energy or lack of energy in the morning, how difficult it is for you to wake up or not, etc. That's all observational. And then you start putting together your theories. Well, it looks like I didn't sleep well on this night and I did sleep well on this night. What might have been different? Maybe it was this thing. Okay, I'm going to try doing that. I'm going to try drinking warm milk before bed every night because that might have helped. And then you do it and then you get the data and you see, is this helping? If yes, great. I'll keep doing it. If no, okay, I can keep doing it if I like it for other reasons, but it doesn't seem worth doing just to get my sleep up and sleep going better. Anyway, just kind of a brief overview that sleep is complex and complicated. It doesn't seem or feel that way all the time because we do it every day for the most part. Spend about a third of our lives asleep, right? Like babies sleep 20 hours a day before they can do anything else. Sleep is like one of the most natural things in the world. And then obviously there are also situations in which it becomes not so natural, where it becomes difficult. Just reading a chat comment there. Yeah, in particular, this tends to be more of a thing on the going to sleep side, which we've talked about more in the past. So unless we have questions and comments in this direction, I'll just mention it briefly and then we'll switch over to talking about waking up. But kind of the whole point of most people's experience of sleep these days hasn't always been this way, and it definitely isn't this way for everybody. But most of us have put together areas where we are comfortable in order to fall asleep. We turn off lights, we get into a soft or supportive or whatever kind of a bed that feels good for our body. We cover ourselves with the right pajamas or sheets or blankets and pillows that feel comfortable to us, et cetera, et cetera. Some of us more than others certainly put in like conscious intentional effort to make sure that we're doing that. But even just our default, like societal norms are based around physical comfort, because it does make falling asleep much easier if you're physically comfortable. Flip side, if you're physically comfortable, that means there's not a lot of reason for your cognitive miser brain to pay a lot of attention to what's going on in the moment, to pay attention to your body or your environment, which frees up those resources to start going on to more like cognitive and theoretical things. And sometimes that's great. And it's, you're coming up with cool stories or thinking about exciting things you're going to do. And sometimes it's terrible. And you're thinking about, what if I get hit by a meteor and die? Or what about that time I tripped in the 7th grade in front of everybody? And it's terrible. As with all things, this isn't like, what's the word I'm looking for? This isn't unique to sleep. Thinking about what you're doing while you're doing it just generally makes it impossible to do. Or if not impossible, at least makes it much more difficult to do. Thinking is really great beforehand and afterwards, but in the moment, if I were to try to think about every single word, specifically consciously choose every word I'm using, I could not speak fluently the way that I am right now. And even if I did that, I still couldn't think consciously about every tone and how I'm shaping my mouth and vocal instrument and blah, blah, blah. So thinking about trying to fall asleep when you're trying to fall asleep is a problem. Same goes for thinking about waking up when you're trying to wake up. the more you think about it, the worse it's going to be, because you probably wouldn't be thinking about it in the moment, right? When you're in the process of waking up, you probably wouldn't be thinking about the process of waking up, or that you need to wake up, or that you're having a struggle to wake up, or whatever, unless there was something that wasn't going well already that drew your attention to it. And then by thinking about it, it just kind of makes it that much harder. Sometimes we get caught in bed for energetic and physical and organic reasons, and for emotional and cognitive reasons as well. We get stuck sometimes, and usually it has to do with thinking. So there's a broad overview, I suppose. I don't know. I'm just going where I'm going today. It's me solo again, so although I have you guys here in chat with me. So one thing that needs to be said off the top, as always, is remember that there are two sides to any equation. If you're struggling to get up at the time that you need to get up, one side to look at is your process of waking up and what things can be changed in order to make it easier for you to wake up, or for you to go to bed earlier, so then it becomes easier, whatever thing we're exploring. The other side to look at, though, is when is it that you're trying to get up and why? And usually there's some pretty clear answers about that, right? Usually we have obligations. For most of us, you got to be at school by X time. You got to be at work by 9 a.m. or whatever thing. So there's really limited flexibility. Yeah, two sides, my side and the wrong side. Sure. I like that. But not always. And even if there is an obligation there, a lot of the time people won't explore what options they have to potentially shift that obligation. So for example, if you do have a job that expects you to be in by 9 a.m. and that is difficult for you, sometimes it's a possibility, not always, but sometimes it's a possibility to talk with your employer or your collaborators or whomever is asking you to be there at that time about what your experience is of waking up. Maybe that's not necessary, but to find out what wiggle room there is. Can I shift to coming in at 9:30, 10, 11? Can I shift to a completely different schedule altogether and just work from 1 p.m. to 9 p.m. or whatever kind of thing? We probably won't talk a lot about that specifically either, which is why I'm making sure to mention it off the top, because that's so very unique to each person's individual life. I'm just saying it's worth exploring. I really need to find ways to incentivize sleep for myself. I find I physically can't sleep unless I actually intend to, and intending to sleep is an executive function thing, which I struggle with a lot. And on top of that, I've been regularly sleep deprived for about 15 years now, so I have a pretty big wall of awful about it. That makes sense. That definitely makes sense. And the wall of awful, just to clarify for anybody who doesn't know, I don't know whose concept it is. If you do, mention that in the chat. If you know who came up with that and could share that, I would appreciate that. But the wall of awful refers to an idea that every time I try to do a thing and struggle or fail or have some negative experience with the thing, the next time I try to do that thing, it's not only difficult for whatever reasons it was difficult the first time, but now in addition to that, I have to get past this wall of awful before I even try. The wall of awful being my idea about whether or not it will work. Based on previous experiences. So basically, every time I struggle to fall asleep, the next time I think about trying to go to sleep, before I can even try that, I have this big wall saying, don't even bother thinking about it, that I got to work past. I think that's more or less what you're referring to there, but I would appreciate it if you do know who came up with that, so I can credit them, for this massive following of millions of people here. Let's not forget the value of exercise and how it can contribute to quality sleep. Yes, it can. And also sometimes exercising less or different times during the day or different types of exercise can also help. Actually, that's worth talking about. Sometimes I can be a little better about it if I have plenty of free time and can make the entire evening pleasant. It also helps us a lot if I had a productive day. Yeah. Okay. So we're talking more about the falling asleep part, which is where the focus usually is. So let's talk about that. I like both of those things, both of those comments, the value of exercise and how it can contribute to quality sleep, but also having free time and a pleasant evening and having a productive day. All of that is referencing what happened in a day prior to going to sleep, which is important. And both of you in the chat who mentioned those two things have thought about it. Yeah. Okay. So the wall of awful How to ADHD has a video on it, I think, and I don't think they came up with it. Jessica McCabe is How to ADHD is her YouTube channel. But they probably credit the person who I can't Google right now. Yeah, a lot of the time, well, not a lot of the time, generally speaking, we start with a narrow focus and widen out as we need to. So if someone first starts struggling with sleep, they're going to focus on the actual process of falling asleep and what's happening in that moment. The more you struggle, the more you might start to look at things that happen before or after. And yeah, having your day go a particular kind of way helps. Because here's the thing about sleep, and I'm going to like way oversimplify it for my own sake, because I don't know enough about the real deep and complex biological interactions of specific neurotransmitters and things like that. But we're going to use constructs to talk about it. So a simple way to talk about this is, you have different systems that need to shut down, not simultaneously, but in concert with each other in the right order. And any glitch in that process, if something shuts down in the wrong order before something else, can cause problems. And those glitches can happen for all kinds of reasons, but this is one thing that's particularly useful to look at. As an example of that most people have experienced is the jerking awake thing, right? That for whatever reason, the process of dreaming, we'll call it, has begun before your body is completely paralyzed, which is a thing that the body actually does to itself when you're asleep. It paralyzes itself because the brain, like we talk about all the time, the brain doesn't have a mechanism that allows it to distinguish between whether something is perceiving originated in environmental physical stimuli or whether something is perceiving originated in cognitive data. So when you're asleep and you're dreaming, to your brain, that's the same thing as experiencing it. And if your body is not incapacitated or at least stopped from moving at that time, you act it out. There are people who have very rare disorders that are beyond just sleepwalking and into, their body doesn't shut down. And so it just tries to do all the things that are happening in the dream, whatever that is, and no matter how nonsensical. There's a movie called Sleepwalk with me. Oh, and I'm blanking on this guy's name too. I got to get better about remembering people's names. Mike Birbiglia, who has that disorder, that sleepwalking, or I don't even know what it's actually called, but it explores that in a very artistic, kind of a way. So that's an example of when the process glitches. It's not even that all the systems weren't shutting down. It just, the timing of it didn't happen quite right. And so something that you're imagining or dreaming makes your body react a little bit. And then that body reacting a little bit, that movement and environmental data then brings you back to consciousness. Because if someone shakes you, you usually wake up. I guess this does tie back to waking up and what things wake us up. Anyway, so looking at what happens in the day before going to sleep is a very helpful thing. And again, this is helpful if you track and observe data, whether that's through sleep monitoring stuff or whatever. I think a useful way to talk about it is you've got different systems, different types of energy or whatever you want to call it. And each of those needs to be at the right place at the right time. If, for example, you go through a day where you are physically exhausted, you work yourself really hard and you're sweating and your muscles are fatigued and sore, but you are bored and what you're doing, you don't get to do anything fun or interesting and whatever. A lot of the time you'll go to try and fall asleep and your body will want to shut down right away, but your brain is going to want to think, and you sit there and you start thinking about all kinds of things. And vice versa. Sometimes there are days that are just mentally exhausting and draining and your brain is wanting to shut down, but your body isn't ready for that and hasn't done enough and has a bunch of energy that's still going around, and that doesn't work either, right? Those are the times where it's like you're feeling antsy or I'm trying to remember, my wife has a particular term for it. She says her legs are wiggly or something like that. They're like you're in bed wanting to sleep, but your body's like moving around. So we can divide these up in all kinds of ways, but one that I find particularly useful is to look at 3 categories of things that you want to get enough of in every given day. In any day, you want something that fits in each of these 3 categories, and you can experiment over time with how much you need of each particular thing. The two things that I just mentioned, and one split into 2. So one is physically. You need to do enough with your body so that you're so that your energy is depleted and it's ready to rest. It's ready to go to sleep. That can be exercise, but I always want to be careful about it doesn't have to be. And in fact, it's not always beneficial for a given individual to exercise at all or exercise more or anything like that. Especially looking at things like timing, right? Sometimes people will work out later on in the day, and that can do things with your body that make it hard to fall asleep, even though you are tired. But also there are things like post-exertion malaise, and a lot of these processes I'm saying we meaning me, but also collectively, even in the medical field, these things are relatively new to being studied. Post-exertion malaise is that if you push yourself too hard, it can cause you biologically to struggle. And that's something that typically gets talked about as a mental thing, that, oh, you push yourself too hard and now you just need to relax. But there are biological mechanisms involving, and I don't know enough about all this stuff to say with confidence, but things like mast cells and mast cell activation syndrome is one of these things. So yeah, doing more with your body can be helpful. Sometimes doing less with your body can be helpful. Winding down more. Think about it like we talk about kids, right? That when we're getting ready to try and put kids to sleep, if any of you have kids, people will talk all the time about, oh, they're too riled up. We got to wind them down. We got to get them to start calming their bodies down. Yeah. Like well before sleeping, you probably want to start that process. There was a reference. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. So there's the physical side. And then there's the cognitive side. And we want to split that up into a couple different things. One is, as was mentioned here, I think the word productive. Plenty of free time and can make an entire evening pleasant. Also helps if I had a productive day. So two things. One is that pleasant free time, right? A very popular kind of meme thing the last few years has been revenge bedtime procrastination, that it rolls around to bedtime, but you're so upset about not having been able to do things either you wanted to do or needed to do during the day that you're pushing off bedtime to try and get some of that stuff in. And oftentimes don't get that stuff in even when you push off bedtime anyway, and then you're tired the next day and the cycle repeats. So again, this is where I love to use not my phrase, but the terms hedonic and eudaimonic from Greek philosophy, which, I just like those terms. Every time I use them, I apologize for them, but I like them because they separate out enjoyment into two different categories. One is hedonic, which means something that you enjoy the experience of moment to moment in and of itself, regardless of anything else that it might be connected to or lead toward or pull away from. None of that matters. The experience in and of itself is enjoyable. Think about things like eating something delicious or engaging in a particular hobby or interest, playing video games, texting friends, hanging out with friends, watching movies, whatever. That the experience moment to moment is enjoyable. The other eudaimonic joy is about that whatever it is that you're doing, whether or not the experience in and of itself is enjoyable, it's enjoyable because it feels, whether we call it productive or meaningful or purposeful, it feels like it is connected to something else that really does matter to you. And that by doing the thing, you are getting closer to what matters to you, or you're acting on. So it can be things like a long-term goal, and I do something crappy that I don't enjoy, but it gets me closer to that, can feel purposeful and meaningful, eudaimonic. It can be, I have an ideal about things like altruism or community or charity, and therefore I volunteer time or donate money, which those things may or may not be enjoyable in and of themselves, but they're enjoyable because it feels like I am embodying this value, this ideal that I have. It's about connection, that whatever the thing is doesn't have an intrinsic connection to what you've created that link to. Doesn't mean that the link isn't valid or, rational or anything like that. It just means that they're two separate things, but we've connected them. Oh, Wall of Awful, she credits to Brendan Mahan. That's cool. I actually just, I wish I had known that. Just a couple of days ago, I was speaking with him. He had me on his podcast, which I don't know when that's going to come out. But that's really interesting to know. And of course, he told me how to pronounce his name, and I already forgot it. Brendan Mahan or Brendan Mahan. I'm sorry, I forgot. That's a fun little coincidence. So yeah, you need both in a day. And of course, you don't need in the sense like it's impossible to fall asleep or whatever if you don't get it. But in terms of like making it optimal, if your body is tired and you feel as though you've had both purposeful, like eudaimonic joy in the day and also just enjoyable free time, relaxing, whatever, hedonic joy during the day, those three things, if you do those three things, generally speaking, things are going to wind down in concert a little bit better. And again, oversimplification, but a good one to start with. So start evaluating your days when you're looking at your sleep, how you're falling asleep, how you're waking up, all that stuff. Start correlating it with how those three buckets were filled during that day. What things did I do that moved my body or drained me physically? What things did I do that were just enjoyable in and of themselves, free time, pleasurable? And what things did I do that felt purposeful and meaningful or productive or whatever? And you can start tinkering with those, trying to do more of one, more of the other, less of one, etc. Mahan. I think that might be a joke pronunciation, but maybe not. Mahan. Yeah, we want to just start making correlations and testing theories because there is so much research around sleep, because it's important. And that's great that we have that research. But you are an individual. And the fact that on average, people of a certain age or a certain type or whatever tend to do best with 8 hours of sleep doesn't mean that you need 8 hours of sleep. You might need more, you might need less. It might be about something. Mahan. Okay, Brendan Mahan, yeah. It might be that you need less of something, it might be about timing, et cetera, et cetera. So research is really great in terms of getting an idea of what to try. And it can become really counterproductive and detrimental if instead of treating it as a guidebook on this is what happens for most people or helps most people, so this is something that seems worth trying, and turn it instead into this is how you're supposed to do it. Because not everybody is going to be benefited by any particular way of doing it. And you have to be able to free yourself up to try it and then say, that didn't work, I'm trying something else. Instead of, nope, I just got to keep trying this. Especially with sleep. How many of us get stuck in that cycle of wake up exhausted, morning, early afternoon, exhausted, and promising ourselves the whole time, I'm going to go to bed earlier today. I'm going to go to bed earlier tonight. So this isn't my experience. And then by the time whatever bedtime we had identified rolls around, it's like, yeah, no, never mind. Now I'm finally feeling active and engaged and I don't want to go to sleep. Sometimes I want to go to sleep but can't, and so on, whatever. And we get trapped in that because we've identified the solution. The solution is I got to go to sleep earlier, but I don't do it, right? For whatever reason. And then the next time I still think the solution is the same one, go to bed earlier, still don't do it for whatever reason. And the next one and the next one and so on. We got to throw away, I've been calling it the sticky answer lately. I don't know, that's fun to me. We got to throw away answers that are theoretically accurate, but not practically useful to an individual. I am sorry. I don't know why. Usually these notifications are, turn off all notifications. There we go. We got to get rid of those theoretically accurate but practically unhelpful answers because the brain is a cognitive miser and it won't explore other possibilities as long as it thinks it has the answer. If the answer is go to bed early, doesn't matter that I can't get myself to do it. That's the only answer I'm going to come up with. So we try it. Try it as long as you want. Give it a good, old college try, whatever that phrase is. And if it doesn't work, you move on. You try something else. You can even keep trying that initial thing, but just add on that you're trying something else. Or you can give up and throw it away and say, that doesn't work for me. There are actual internal rhythms of wakefulness and sleep for every person, and they are not the same. And we have good research that shows things like, for example, that the internal circadian rhythm is what it's called, the sleep-wake cycle, that it doesn't map to a 24-hour day. If we take somebody and remove them from all physical cues about time and sleep and day and night and whatever, just put them in a room where the lighting and everything is the same no matter what time of day, what we find is that people's circadian rhythm is, I want to say it's about 25 hours, but it might be something like 24 hours and 45 minutes. It's close, but just not quite the same as the actual 24-hour day, which is very interesting to me. I want to know more about that research and all that kind of stuff. But we also have good research that shows that people do have different natural patterns of sleep, that the night owl versus the early bird is an actual thing as best we can tell. What exactly happens to make that, say, a deep dark cave? What actually happens that means that one person is a night owl versus one person being an early bird, or what particular distinctions, we don't know. But it's a thing. So you can experiment with that, especially if you have the ability, which doesn't happen a lot, honestly, when you have a good chunk of a week or two or months even where you don't have to be up by a certain time, or you don't have to go to bed by a certain time, to just let yourself explore and figure out. I'm mentioning this in particular because a lot of times college students have more of an ability to experiment with this, where they have more control over their own schedule, and it's a good time to do that. And you can find what is your most natural sleep schedule. For me, I know it's been many years since I've done this, but when I was doing it, what I eventually found was that sleeping from about 2 a.m. to about 9 a.m., 9:30 a.m. was my ideal sleep schedule. That's what my body and brain would do if I let them do whatever they want. Doesn't mean that you have to always sleep that way. I have 3 young children. I cannot sleep on that schedule. Or I suppose if I were to try, that would leave a lot on my wife to handle all by herself, and that's not cool. So no, I can't sleep on that schedule. And it's possible even that if my schedule opened back up and I went back to trying to sleep on that schedule, that it wouldn't be the same anymore, that something would change either because of what I've been doing or just, natural aging or development or whatever. So you want to figure that out. And then you want to know, if you're not able to sleep on that schedule, you got to put something in place. It's going to take work. Your natural way of operating is that schedule. If you need to sleep on a different schedule, it's not impossible, but it's not going to be natural. And it's never going to come down to just, I should go to sleep earlier. If I should go to sleep earlier works for you, great. But anybody who even knows what I'm talking about, it doesn't work for you. Because if it worked for you, you would have thought it once and done it, and it would have been fine. I think of it like elastic, right? That whatever your natural sleep cycle is, that the more that you pin some elastic to that time of when you go to bed and when you wake up. And the more you shift off of that, the more you're pulling that elastic, the more tension there is, which means the more effort you have to put into holding onto it. Because if you let go, it'll snap back. And sometimes if you pull too hard and it snaps back or breaks and snaps back or whatever, then it can get real bad. But it doesn't necessarily it can get easier by doing certain specific things, especially, but it never becomes natural. It's like weight management and dieting and things like this are a very similar kind of a thing. Like, can you get your body to behave differently than it is naturally constructed? Yes, by putting specific work and effort into doing that, and you don't ever get to stop, because if you do, it will revert. It doesn't matter how long you've done the new way. And of course, there's lots of gray area and whatever here. I love theories about, like, we evolved this ridiculously weird sleep system for this incredibly practical reason. Even if I'm always skeptical of them, it's fun to think about. I agree. I do a lot of thinking about evolution and evolutionary psychology and that kind of stuff, about how would this make sense in the context of, most of human evolution took place over millions of years, where social dynamics and whatever, the physical structure of things weren't that different. We've changed a lot over the last few thousand years, several thousand years, whatever you want to say. I can't work on my sleep schedule when my external schedule is in flux because I'm too stressed about just getting to sleep. And college is the worst because the work is never really over and the workload is never ending. When I can be done once I'm home, I can actually manipulate that time more. Yeah. So this gets us into a different thing, and this is what we do, right? Like this comment is taking us in a slightly different direction about predictability, which equates to safety. One thing that you need to be aware of is that being asleep, is a vulnerable state to be in. We talked about earlier in terms of like physical comfort. We set up our sleep environments for physical comfort, but we also do things like perhaps check the locks on the doors, or just take a look and make sure that the oven is off, or whatever kinds of things different people might do differently, because we know we're going into a vulnerable state and we want to feel safe. And predictability assists with feeling safe. When things are unpredictable, it's hard to feel safe. And sleep starts to turn into more of a practical thing, right? I need X amount of sleep in order to be able to function tomorrow in the ways that I need to. And so we start treating it as a task, right? I'm stressed about getting enough sleep, because the sleep itself, which is a natural process that will happen on its own sooner or later, we're now thinking about it while we're trying to do it. And we're making equations in our head of, I need this in order for that. I think most people have had that experience sometime in their life where you're stuck awake in the middle of the night saying, okay, if I fall asleep now, I'll get 6 hours of sleep. And then an hour goes by. Okay, if I fall asleep now, I'll get 5 hours of sleep. And the more you stress about falling asleep, the less able you are to actually fall asleep. So college homework generally is just terrible for many, many, many reasons, not least of which is that it doesn't do what people who are pro homework claim that it does. We have a lot of research on this. It doesn't help learning outcomes. It just is a source of stress for instructors too, by the way. It's not just on one side of it. And I don't want to take it. And I mean, unless you guys want to go in that direction, I want to take us off on a whole thing. But yes, being able to construct or build more predictability into your day, more routine, not just in terms of schedule, but in terms of what is in your bed every night, what is in your bedroom every night, what do you do at what time every night before going to bed, how do you wake up, and what's the timing, and et cetera. The more predictability you can get, the easier it'll be for you to be able to do anything, really. Again, there are all kinds of things we talk about as being important for children and then act like it's not also important for adults, as though somehow we change in some fundamental way as we grow. Consistency is one of those things. People talk all the time about consistency is important for kids, and it absolutely is. And it's also important for adults. We have probably, as we grow, we become better able to adapt to disruptions in our routine or to a lack of consistency or predictability, but it doesn't become like enjoyable or non-problematic for us. We just get better at dealing with it. So yeah, we want consistency. When your external schedule is in flux, I mean, one of the kind of jokes that goes around, a meme that goes around ADHD, social media, but also just neurodivergent social media in general is, oh, I have a call at 3 p.m. today, which means that from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., I'm just going to be waiting for that call. That we fixate on like one particular thing in the future and kind of work backwards from there about everything we've got to do between now and then has to be aimed at that thing. And sometimes we don't really have anything to do about that. And so we just kind of get stuck thinking about that thing. Again, different people have different ability to make their schedule be more predictable, make their life be more routine and predictable. But to whatever extent you can, it's worth exploring what you can do to make that happen. Because unpredictability is stressful, and stress does not help you fall asleep. It does the opposite. Actually, worth saying, I think, stress doesn't help you do anything. A lot of times people will say, oh, the stress motivates me. I get really stressed and then finally that gets me to do a thing. No, stress doesn't help you do anything. Stress is a bad experience. It sucks. So it's something that you want to go away. If we're talking about motivation in that sense, it's a negative reinforcement thing, right? Like, I want to do the thing so I can stop feeling the stress. But the stress that you are feeling before you're able to stop feeling it in whatever way, the stress that you are feeling makes everything harder, including whatever thing you're supposed to be doing in order to get that stress to go away. So yeah, it makes it more valuable to do whatever you're trying to do. It also makes it more costly to do whatever you're trying to do. Stress is not a good thing, or at least it's a good thing in the same way that pain is a good thing, and that it's good for us to have feedback systems and observational ability to say, oh, this thing isn't helpful to me or could potentially be harmful to me. Yeah. Like, I need to call the hairdresser at some point between 11 and 3. So from 9 to 11, I'll be prepping for the call. 11 to 3, I'll be procrastinating on the call. And 3 to sleep, I'll be berating myself for not managing to make the call. Yeah, this is one of the areas I think it's easiest to see that a lot of what is a problem for neurodivergent people, or people with ADHD in particular, is that they think about stuff more, care about certain stuff more than the norm. Because we usually talk about it the other way. Oh, you're procrastinating on the call from 11 to 3, or from 11 to 3, you procrastinate, you must not really care. No, you care so much that you are spending cognitive energy on it starting at the beginning of the day, all day long. And yes, the wall of awful, or dreading what it's going to feel like afterwards, and et cetera, et cetera. Thinking about things, this is just a blanket rule, thinking about things prevents you from doing them. It helps you to prepare to do them later. But when you're thinking about something actively, think right now about, are you holding your hands in a normal way? And as soon as you start thinking about it, it starts to say, oh, am I? How do I normally hold my hands? I don't know, right? Honestly, well, we only got 13 minutes left, and that was going to go down a bigger path, a different direction. Some practical things I wanted to say about waking up, because there are some practical things there. Number one, if you do have to wake up at a time when you don't naturally wake up, you have to be up when your body would never actually wake up on its own at that time. No, let me say it this way. Number one, to whatever extent, why have you made me conscious of my hands? Sorry about that. Sometimes these examples, they cause problems themselves. Number one, to whatever extent you're able, structure the rest of your life in such a way that you don't have to wake up. You just wake up when you wake up, and it's okay. But we all have very limited ability to do that. So then number two, if you're going to have to wake up before that, before looking at going to sleep earlier and all those other things, which are good but complicated, let's focus in just on the process of waking up. And you need some kind of external stimulation to do it. Usually that's an alarm. Here's an important thing that comes up a lot. If it's somebody else wakes you up, that's not worse than having an alarm. Unless that person has some specific problem with being the person who wakes you up, or it causes some interpersonal conflict because you don't like being woken up and now you're mad at that person or whatever. But just in and of itself, being woken up by an alarm is not better than being woken up by another person, or being woken up by the sun, or being woken up by a rooster, or anything like that. Whatever works for you, great. Try doing a second sleep on Monday and end up waking up at 10 p.m. on Tuesday. That's probably a sign that there's some stuff worth investigating around sleep, if you can sleep that long and that late on a second sleep, but I don't know the details. So there's not an intrinsically better or worse way to do it. It's just about what way works best for you individually. And yes, as a general rule, things that are waking you up are things that the brain interprets as a problem that needs to be addressed. Because sleep is an important, natural, restful, biological process. We need to do it. We have built-in mechanisms in our brain that wake us up out of sleep before we're actually done sleeping, if there's some problem that needs to be addressed. Whether that's a loud noise, whether that's your body moving, or whether that's things like if you stop breathing in the night, like sleep apnea, if you stop breathing, your brain will say, oh, wake up, something's wrong, we're not getting enough oxygen, right? So just know that there is no way that you can make yourself wake up earlier than you would naturally wake up that is going to be happy and comfortable. You might be able to transition very quickly. The alarm goes off, you wake up and you're excited about your day. That can happen. But the process of the alarm waking you up, if your brain didn't interpret the alarm as a problem, as uncomfortable, as whatever, then it wouldn't wake you up. And that is what happens to a lot of us. We have things that wake us up and they work for us, and then they stop working. I've started sleeping through my alarm. That's what's happened. Your brain has, for whatever reason, ceased to see that thing as problematic, as needing to be dealt with. So it just flushes it out. Just like we can sleep, there's a range of tolerance, right? We can sleep, let's say temperature, from a certain level of cold to a certain level of hot, we can sleep in there. And the closer we get to the edges, probably the worse the sleep quality, but it doesn't have to be exactly one thing static in the middle. The brain, the attentional processes and perceptive processes, those still function while you're sleeping, just differently. And so things do get filtered out. We get used to it. People talk all the time about, like, I can fall asleep anywhere. It doesn't matter what light or who's talking or whatever, right? And sometimes that could be biologically like born into somebody, but it could just be that for whatever reason, their brain has learned, yeah, I sleep when people are talking and that's not a problem. So you just don't even notice it. So know that we're dealing with that, and that what we're trying to do then, if we have if we wake up before we would naturally wake up and we want it to not be a miserable process, it's about transitioning from the problematic wake up, the alarm, into whatever good things for that day or for whatever as quickly and easily and automatically as possible. But in terms of, I'm just going to use the word alarm to mean anything that's outside of you that wakes you up. There are different ways of doing that, both in terms of, like, the different kinds of alarms that people make and sell these days, but also in categorical ways. So number one, this is a feature that came out with what are called sunrise alarms, at least as far as I know. Sunrise alarms are alarms that use light to wake you up, and half an hour before the set alarm time, the light starts to gradually get brighter and brighter to kind of mimic the sunrise. The idea being that because we all have sleep cycles, and there are certain points in that cycle where it's both easiest and most comfortable to wake up, we want more of a range in which we can wake up instead of like a hard right at the same time. Because if over the course of a half an hour, something is starting to kind of come into our awareness as needing to be dealt with, well, we have a half-hour window where if we, in our sleep cycle at any point in there, hit that kind of stage where it's easiest and best for us to wake up, we can do it at that time. Which, the better you can do in making yourself a bigger window, the better. Because really, what we talked about originally, waking up naturally, all we're doing is making it an all day long window, right? So the bigger you make your window, the better. And I don't know what other things are out there that might, mimic that other than the sunrise alarms. I imagine that there are others in categories we'll talk about here in a second, but I'm not sure. So that's one thing. Another is take a look at what kinds of physical stimuli you respond to. If you have sensory sensitivity, take advantage of that, or potentially avoid it. An auditory sensitivity means that an audible alarm clock is probably going to be doing a pretty good job of waking you up, because your brain, for whatever reason, identifies audible information, auditory information, as more worth noticing. That's what the sensitivity is. So it'll probably do a better job of waking you up. It might also take something that for someone else is kind of like unpleasant, stupid alarm, and turn it into something that you dread and hate, that it is an overwhelming experience for your nervous system. But auditory, visual, and for visual, we can look at sunrise alarms or things like that, or even things like, if you have somebody else around, just have them start to turn on the light, or turn on a light that's further away but does get to your bedroom, and then closer light later on, or whatever. There are scent diffusers if you have olfactory sensitivity, smell sensitivity, both in terms of helping fall asleep, right? Some people will swear by I don't. I am hyposensitive. I'm not sensitive at all to smell, so I don't use this stuff. But I think it's jasmine is one of the ones that people say will help relax and fall asleep. There are scent diffusers that have timers so that you can set an alarm for a smell to start going off at a certain point, kind of like the sunrise alarm, and then you can wake up more naturally. And then tactile, which is a big one. If you struggle with the sound-based alarms, auditory alarms, try tactile. Try something that vibrates. Get something. They have things, I believe, where you can put a mat like under your whole mattress that can do it. But it doesn't need to be. I mean, it can be a smartwatch that vibrates. It can be lavender. Lavender is the relaxing scent, apparently. But yeah, experiment with different categories there. I have had people, because our norm is the sound alarm clock, right? That's the most commonly known and used thing. I have had clients who have struggled for years and years and years with waking up, and I've had clients where there's a teenager struggling to wake up and it's causing all kinds of family troubles and conflict and whatever. And then they just switch to a sunrise alarm clock, a visual alarm clock instead of an auditory one, and never struggle to wake up again. That's probably a little hyperbolic, but all of a sudden it's no longer a problem the way that it was. So look at shifting different ways, different physical types of data, of information, stimulation. Stimulation. Why did that sound so weird to me? Anyway. Social data is a big one, especially for a lot of neurodivergent people, paying attention to other people. In fact, generally speaking, when we're talking about I've got to be up by X time, even if I don't want to be, more often than not, by a long shot these days, what we're saying is there are other people that I need to interact with, and in order to do that in whatever kind of a way, I have to wake up at this time because that's when they're going to be available. We're not so much doing, I mean, obviously some people are, but we're not so much these days. Most of us are not getting up in the morning because that's when we need to, milk the cows or whatever. I don't know a lot about that lifestyle. I don't know why that's better done earlier in the morning, but there it is. So that's a good way to be able to transition out of the unpleasant experience of waking up before you wanted to naturally into the day, is to put things as soon as possible there that you enjoy and look forward to. So that even if waking up is like, ugh, as soon as you do, you're like, well, at least now I get to do this thing. Honestly, this is going to sound ridiculous, but it's a joke, right? That people talk about a lot, is waking up to the smell of bacon for many people is enjoyable. If you have somebody else living with you and they're up before you are and they don't mind and you can talk about it, have them throw a piece of bacon in the microwave or on the stove at such and such time, so that the olfactory, the smell is what wakes you up. And as soon as you wake up, you very quickly shift onto, ooh, I'm going to eat that bacon. Or, ooh, now I get to, I don't know, whatever different kind of a thing. Myself as a child, but also my children now, in large part because at 6 a.m., I'm not doing so hot, even though I'm awake with them. I'm not very energetic and online and all those kinds of things. There's a reason we have Saturday morning cartoons and things like that. My kids get to watch videos or play on their tablet or whatever when they first wake up, which makes it easier that when they wake up, even if it's like, oh, I'm tired. Oh, now I get to do that thing that I want to do. So try and get yourself to transition into the rest of the day as quickly as possible. Put fun things before upsetting, difficult things, again, as much as possible. We have limits. Something that helps me is just restricting inputs in general around the bed. If I could be on a stable top bunk surrounded by blackout curtains and super quiet jazz noir coming from the other side of the room, that would be ideal. Yeah, so that's sensory deprivation, right? That if I have an auditory sensitivity, which means that sounds are going to mess with my ability to sleep, it's that much more important for me to utilize something to block out the sounds. Same with blackout curtains and visual data or whatever different, the stable bed, for example, is a tactile thing. And of course, there are other ways of looking at all this, but looking at the type of physical data it is, whether it's sound waves or whatever, right? Actually, yeah, getting into a small place can be very helpful. I kind of think my personal theory is that a small little place is easier to protect yourself and hide away, right? Like sleeping out in the open is more vulnerable. So these sensitivities, you can block them. You block them out to sleep better, use them to wake up, get rid of them because they make waking up too much of a painful process. Just pay attention to the data. Same with the meaningful stuff and the hedonic stuff. I would say generally, no, I'm not going to say generally. I would say that my experience personally, and it seems anecdotally that more of the people I know do better by putting hedonic joy earlier in the morning rather than eudaimonic. In other words, going for a run because it'll help you to be healthier, very difficult to do in the morning. But if you're someone who enjoys the process of going for a run as hedonic joy, then you can do it easy, or more easily at least. Having a big stuffed animal to hug helps, and a cat at my feet. You know, there's a particular theory I have about cats and ADHD people and neurodivergent people because they are good sources of both audible and tactile input. You know, the weight, the vibration, the sound of the purring, and the soft and blah, blah, blah. The weight I'm talking about when the cat like lays on your chest, which seems to be a pretty common experience. We're going to wrap up because it's been an hour, but I did want to say one thing really quickly. And what was that going to be? Something about... I think I lost it. I feel like it was something about sleep quality. Oh, well. If I think of it, I'll tweet it out or something like that, or we can talk about it again next time. But we got to wrap up and move along. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, especially for those of you in chat, for making this a fun and interactive conversation for me instead of just me spouting off for an hour. I will be back next Wednesday, same time, 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Central. We still are having that Facebook issue, and we're going to hopefully get that resolved for next week. But I said that last week, and I forgot. So I'm going to try. And yeah, thanks for being here. I will talk to you all later.